Top Democratic Party fundraisers planning to help Vice President Kamala Harris after President Biden's announcement that he is ending his re-election bid and backing Harris. CNBC.com political finance reporter Ryan Schwartz joins us now to discuss all of the latest. So you've been working overtime the last 24 hours. Let's talk money. Let's talk Moneyball.
Crazy times. So since Joe Biden announced he was dropping out of this race and endorsed the vice president to be the nominee for the Democrats, they have raised, we're going over $50 million. And that's through small dollar donations primarily. But behind the scenes, as you know, I've been reporting, there's been this pullback up until that point from some big money players, fundraisers, people loyal to Joe Biden, because post that debate in June, people just didn't think he should be running. These are people who raise a lot of money for the Democratic Party, so they held back, didn't go and fundraise, didn't give the bigger checks. And now it seems like, from my reporting, that many of them are coming home. And it's not everybody, but to just put a fine point on this, many of these same people were not going to come back if he was at the top of the ticket.
You said not everybody. Who's the not everybody?
Well, we talked to somebody like Stuart Bainum Jr. He's the chairman of Choice Hotels. He told me weeks ago he's not going to help Biden. He's going to wait till the Democrats figure this out, maybe post the convention. He tells me that he's not going to come back right now.
And that's what I was wondering, Brian. Are there a lot of them holding out to see who the actual candidate is? Do they like Kamala Harris as that potential candidate?
Well, that's right. I mean, they are trying to see more of an open process. But what does that translate to? They want to see an open convention. Right? They want to see this battle on the floor. But right now, that's right. Right now, there is nothing going in that direction. I mean, maybe Joe Manchin switches parties and does something, but it's really not clear if he's going to be able to do that. And the big reason why is because he doesn't have the money. Okay, the vice president now controls the president's campaign war chest of $96 million because she's at the top of the ticket.
Plus, now you're saying an additional 40 or 50 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Let me ask you a different question, which was last week we were talking about, who might come in to try to be Biden if it's not Kamala. And we were saying, if you were Gretchen Whitmer or if you were, you name your person, that you might not want to, actually, that you might want to sit this race out because you think that this is locked up by former President Trump. And that if you think your best chances are not now, you wait till 28. How does that calculus, if that calculus makes any sense at all, maybe that was wishful thinking by some people, factor into this, and also maybe even factor into certain people's decisions to become or want to be the vice president or on this ticket?
Listen, if you jumped into this thing now, you would have to have a ton of courage. Let's put it that way, because she not only is getting all this money, she controls it now, but she's seeing all these endorsements. Some of the very same people that were being floated around as people who could test Joe Biden in a primary, like Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, they're all coming back to support the vice president. So the idea that some of these bigger players are going to jump in would be kind of wild. And to your point, if they did that, goodbye being her running mate. There's no chance that she would go back around and do this, because this is such a fast process. August is the convention, in a matter of weeks. So the Democrats really are kind of on a time clock here to figure this whole thing out. And people jumping in and fighting isn't really going to.
You remember when Dukakis was running and he chose Benson as his running mate, and Benson did not resign his seat in the Senate, which kind of spoke volumes about what he thought that was going to happen on that ticket. If she were to choose a sitting governor, they're not going to give up their position.
But not right away, because they're going to have to play this whole thing out, the campaign. And this is
even if they nominated her, even if the Democrats nominated her, they're going to give up a position as a sitting governor.
You're
vice president on a ticket.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great point. I mean, the idea here is, you're right. Are they going to step away from their own perch of power in a state where they're the governor to be a running mate or maybe vice president? I think it's a toss-up to see if they'd have interest in that. But I do feel as if there are going to be some pretty big names out there who they're going to be looking at, somebody like a Josh Shapiro, other people from the gubernatorial side where they could bring someone on as a running mate.
In terms of the money piece, how much do you think this $95 million pile matters? There's lots of debate about, if a Manchin were to come or somebody else comes in, can they somehow get access to it the way Bloomberg ultimately donated his money, if you remember? People thought that was like a campaign violation, but then the courts decided that it wasn't. Meaning, how important is that bounty? that one component on a relative basis to what is a $1 billion plus PAC bounty.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a small portion of the larger political finance, efforts that we're seeing with PACs and that, but it is a ton of money. It puts her in the driver's seat of a massive political operation that gives her an advantage with resources. Those financial resources can be used to buy ads, to hire more staff, to really just get the message out there of who she is, who the vice president is. And that's critical over the coming days and weeks because she still needs to acquire all the necessary delegates, right? She still needs to go about that process of raising a ton of money and, basically convincing voters that she should be the one to carry the torch for the Democratic Party and beyond, right? And that's critical. If you're somebody like Manchin who doesn't have access to that type of money, you're just not going to have those resources to play in that game, not at that level, not at the rate that she's going to have to be able to.